Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Monday, February 3rd, and we know that means it's time for another episode of Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, brought to you by Rogue Tulips. We do at Rogue Tulips 501c consulting across all the domains of practice, plus association management services. We also have some exciting news today. We have launched an audio version of our podcast, which is now available on 6 different podcasts, including Anchor, Spotify, Google, Radio Public, Breaker, and Pocket Cast. So if you're out jogging or taking a walk and you want to listen to some interesting conversation about associations, check us out on one of those. And I'm here, as always, with my friend and co-host and colleague, Agnes Amos Coleman. So hello, good morning, Agnes.
Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, wherever our global audience are operating from. My name is Agnes Amos Coleman. I'm a consultant and an author. Over to you, Cecilia.
Thanks, Agnes. And we're here again with one of our favorite guests, new favorite guest, Aaron Castelo, who's here doing a series on government relations and associations in 2020 because it's an election year. So a lot of things are going to change, and it affects, as we know, planning, policy, and strategy, just to name a few areas. So Aaron, why don't you say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Aaron Castelo. I'm an association executive, a CAE. Worked for a number of associations over the year in the government relations area, specifically, typically focused at the state level. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how you sort of measure success for government relations and advocacy programs.
That's great. And that's a great segue into the actual topic, which is the value of government relations. So Aaron, some of the things that people may need to consider is what does success actually look like for government relations? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, really, I think that's the essence of this discussion today is for an organization to really be successful in government relations and advocacy, they really need to define what that means for them. And that involves, you know, buy-in and direction from the board, from the member leadership and staff, because government relations is one of those things that's really difficult to put numbers on. You can't just say, well, we're going to pass a bill this year, or we're going to pass a certain number of bills in states this year, because there's so many things in government relations that are really out of your control. You can do everything right, you can do everything you need to do, and still not get a bill passed. So it's one of those things where, you know, you need to carefully think about how you're going to define success. And you also need to make sure that there's a culture of advocacy at the organization. Does the organization, does the board not only buy in, but lead on these particular issues? Because ultimately, you know, you need their participation, you need their leadership. And really that, you know, again, the essence of this is what does success look like? Because government relations projects and advocacy projects can take years. There's often incremental successes along the way. And so it's a challenge.
So, and then what sort of metrics might people use, though, because you do need to have a way to measure, right? So what kind of metrics do you think people might want to look at when presenting this?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's the obvious kind of long-term and short-term discussions. So if, for example, your goal long-term is we're going to pass some new legislation in X number of states, then you need some incremental goals along the way, some incremental measurements. And that could be things like, you know, building relationships with legislators, having more members involved, having model legislation drafted, finding allies and working with coalitions. So, you know, I think most places I've worked have done some kind of regular government relations report or update to the board, and that can show incremental progress on those goals and measurements. That can be things like, you know, how many meetings have we had with legislators? How many coalitions do we belong to? So some of those are much, you know, more short-term goals that you build toward that long-term goal of ultimately passing legislation. But regular reporting, regular updates to the leadership are all part of this buy-in that's needed, part of that relationship to make sure that, again, everybody's on the same page as far as success. You may say, well, we're going to do meetings with all the freshman members of Congress this year. And you may do that for 2 or 3 Congresses and find out that that's not really moving the needle. So you could revisit that. But there are things like that that you can do that are, you can measure, that you can report back to the board and make sure you have their buy-in.
So Agnes, what are your thoughts so far on this discussion?
It appears to me that it's a strategic goal that requires an ongoing commitment from the organization, not only commitment in terms of the leadership, commitment in terms of the time, and commitment in terms of the resources. And when I say resources, I mean financial resources and staff resources as well. That's what I'm hearing here loud and clear, where the leadership really needs to, get a handle on this. It's not a one-time deal that you just do it and assume that if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you stay put and you carry on and make sure that you see to the end.
Yeah, so I think what we really need is a true commitment and a serious commitment from boards and from other leaders across the organization. Because, and Aaron, you might want to expand on this a little bit, it's not something that's going to happen in a week, right? Or a year, like you've already touched on. It might be a multi-year task. So what is some advice or insights you might have on that, Aaron?
Well, I mean, absolutely. These things can take a number of years. And, I think boards also need to understand that associations have a role in the public space and in public advocacy. So I know there's some organizations that are uncomfortable with that, but really with the tax exempt status, regardless of C3, C6 or whatever, is sort of an understanding that you're serving the public, and that includes educating elected officials and being a good sort of corporate citizen by using your resource, your expertise that your association has, your useful knowledge and expertise to continue to inform public policy. So the board members need to understand that there is that role. There's certainly the role of trying to influence or change public policy to be more favorable towards an industry or a profession or whatever interest the association might represent. But ultimately, Cecilia, as you noted, you need a long-term commitment. I worked for an organization that recently abandoned a very long-term project that they knew from the beginning was going to take a while, but they kind of abandoned it because there was no agreed upon definition of what success would look like. So after a year or two, they had some board members saying, well, nothing's going on. But after 8 years, they had other board members saying, well, a lot's going on. And even though there was no agreement and no consistency about what success looked like. And ultimately, I think that's a real important takeaway.
Well, and do you think sometimes that's because organizations overcommit? And excuse the commentary from my dogs in the background. Do you think boards tend to overcommit to legislative agendas? Like, for example, are they trying to do 10 things when maybe they should focus on 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be. It's going to depend. It's going to vary. I think boards sometimes underestimate the resources it takes for government relations, and it can take a long-term financial investment on many of these issues, and that starts to raise questions internally. Ultimately, there are dollar values that become a lot attached to a lot of these advocacy goals as well.
Yeah, especially with everybody's always has a shrinking budget, I guess, at least in their mind, even if it's really not. I think we do, because we get so hung up on the term nonprofit that, you do have some resources. But then, so Agnes, since you've lived in several countries around the world, how might this relate to associations outside the U.S.? Like, how much government relations activity is I mean, I guess a better way to say is like, are we like, because we are U.S. centric and in the U.S. we're always doing government relations, is it as big a priority outside the U.S.? That's probably the better question.
The situation, it's not unique to other parts of the world. I think it's the application that's going to be different. I think the issues are the same as far as advocacy and the value of it. It just depends on the type of the organizations and their focus and the leadership that's involved and whether they want to make it a priority or not, just as Aaron is actually just shared with us, and he's articulated it extremely well. So, but as far as the uniqueness on a global scale, it's not. It's just the applicability that you would find that would be slightly different, and it'd be different in terms of what the what the value that the organization places on it and what the issues are.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk then a little bit. We'll bring it back to the U.S. view, U.S. centric again, because we are U.S. centric, let's face it. We'll be upfront about that. We love our global audience, but we are not going to speak to an experience we haven't had. So we'll keep it here. So in the U.S., of course, we have many states. We have 50 states in the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. And there's a lot of state activity that goes on. So Aaron, how might that state activity also, I think a lot of times when we talk about government relations, we're thinking federal government relations, but there's also state relations. So, how does that go into the mix?
Well, I mean, states present a real good opportunity for associations to become more engaged. Obviously, state legislators are less insulated. They tend to have less staff. You tend to be able to see your state representative, down the street or at the grocery stores. You know your state legislator a little bit easier. So the argument being that, it's if you've got a good, strong local chapter of your organization, they can build those relationships with state level folks and maybe move the needle a little bit easier than you can here in the Washington, D.C. area. And, a great number of state legislators go on to serve in Congress. So relationships with them, I think we talked about that a little bit on the grassroots discussion. It's an opportunity to build relationships. But also because you have 50 states, you have a real opportunity to go in and tailor your needs, maybe tailor your legislation to something that can work in a particular state. And a lot of organizations take model legislation out to the states and really try it out. You can also show that you're having some success. If you can get a couple states to act on legislation. Again, I worked at an organization a few years back that was interesting. The updates to the board, federal lobbyists would come in and give an update and say, well, we got 2 more members of Congress or 5 more members of Congress to sign on to this dear colleague level to help support some legislation in Congress. And the state level lobbyists would come in and give their report to the CEO and to the board and say, well, we passed bills in 6 states, we defeated bills in 8 states, because states move. They have limited legislative sessions. Many times, as I said, state legislators, it's a part-time job for them. Legislative sessions can be very short, so they have to act. So there's a lot of opportunities in the states to show that you're making some progress.
Oh, and and I think that's a bit of a, well, I guess it's kind of an awkward segue, but I'll use it as one. So before we end, because we only have a few minutes left in today's episode, Aaron, Agnes, I would love to hear your thoughts on the fly-in, because, most associations that are C6s or C4s especially do the fly-in. So what are your thoughts on the fly-in, as how does that fit in?
Yeah, so I mean, this ties back a little bit to our previous discussion about grassroots, and really what we focused on there when we talked about fly-ins is getting members engaged, and it's a good way to get them involved, learn about the issues, go meet their elected officials, and gain some level of comfort. I think in the context of today's discussion about the value of government relations, again, I'm going to tie it back to you need leadership involved in these fly-ins. You need your board members to be there, not just saying, oh, the government relations committee does that every year at the state capitol or every year in DC. And as a board member, I don't really need to be there. You need board members there involved in this too, so that they can see, how these discussions take place with elected officials. And obviously, if you've got someone that's a board member, that means they're a leader in the industry or the profession or the association. You need them there and involved. And I think that tie it back together again with a lot of this, success of government relations and how you define it really comes back to having your board involved, engaged, and those leaders really being a key part of it. And that includes participating at the fly-in and being there, talking to those state legislators and those members of Congress.
Well, that's well, so as we get down to the 2-minute warning here, which is appropriate since tomorrow is the Super Bowl. Or, oh, okay, I just gave away. We're recording on Saturday, folks. For
Yeah,
Monday.
I already know who won.
So, oops, okay, I just pulled the curtain away. So you've seen the mechanics behind the curtain. Yes, we are recording on Saturday for Monday because I will be on travel. So, so we have like about 2 minutes left after that. So what are some closing thoughts? I'd like to hear from Agnes first, and then Aaron will let you close out.
Sure. I think summing up a lot of what's been discussed here, I hear loud and clear, and I think it's very essential, the value and impact of stakeholder engagement. I think it's so key to all this, more so having that buy-in from the board of directors, because they're the drivers. They drive the vision of the organization in collaboration with the CEO of the organization, and then that kind of filters down. So that, and I think that for our global members who are listening, I think that that's definitely, as they begin to listen to this recording and seeing how do we apply it to our organizations, or how can we learn from this, it's really building on what Aaron has talked about, on really evaluating that stakeholder leadership engagement to make it a successful program for the organization.
Great. And then Aaron, can you give us a 2-minute wrap up? Or not 2 minutes, I'm sorry, 2 sentence. I'm sorry. two sentence wrap up.
Look, I think board involvement is critical. You know, success in government relations, you need to really make sure that there's agreement within the organization on how you're defining it, because it's one of those areas where it can be very incremental. It can take a long time. It's not necessarily always obvious what success looks like. So board members really need to lead and be involved and make sure that there is agreement about how you are measuring success.
That's excellent. Thank you. And thank you again, Aaron, for joining us for another discussion on government relations and associations. And Agnes, as always, thank you for your insights. And as Agnes and I like to say, take 15 minutes and talk to somebody, because you might learn something. Don't forget to check us out at our website, roguetulips.com. We're also supporters of the 501c League, which is a virtual membership organization for anyone in the 501c community and the people who love them. They're also offering at the League an ethics course if you need that CAE credit to renew it this year or going forward. And don't forget to check us out on our audio podcast channel. So thanks again for joining us. I'm Cecilia Supp signing off for the whole crew here at Rogue Tulips. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.